Sorry, glitch. Welcome everyone to the Path of Profit series. I'm very excited to see you live today on our webinar for our fashion and retail executives and business owners. Today we're doing something very spectacular and very real. We're going to build an open to buy model live using the GMROI as the decision engine. So it's not just a spreadsheet exercise, but a profitability and cash efficiency tool you can deploy immediately. So stay tuned. We're super excited to guys have you here. And thank you again for everyone who's tuning in and joining us every month. We do this live events every third Thursday of the month at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you're an executive and you already know the pains of what it takes into a real retail space to ensure that you are maintaining your profitability and you're maintaining the levels of your inventory and consistently matching it up to your buys, you can grow your revenue and still destroy profit, as you know. You can buy on demand and still end up with margin erosion, overstock, markdowns, and cash tied up in a slower movers. And most open to buy models don't fix that because they are either too high level or they are not actionable or too complicated to maintain. So teams stop really using them or paying attention to them. And the goal today is the opposite. We're building the model that is simple enough to run on the weekly and basis and strongly enough to manage the risks and sharp enough to protect margin and cash. Before we begin building the open to buy framework, I want to take a step back and reconnect this to the session of roundtable that we hosted earlier this month. At the beginning of the month, we had an executive roundtable where we unpacked how margin pressure shows up quietly. We talked about the assortment decisions and feel reasonable at the time when vendor structures that seem manageable skew expansions that feel like growth until it really isn't. And that conversation were really about the diagnostic of your problem. And we looked at where the profit leaks began. If you've missed that session, there will be a link at the bottom in the comments that you can be able to come and watch a replay. Highly encourage because this is going to really be sitting on top of what we already discussed. And today we're going to move forward into really more an awareness and the operational structure. If the earlier session helped you recognize where the margin erosion starts, today's session shows you how to design discipline into your buying process so that the erosion does not happen in the first place. We're not teaching you theory. We're bringing you the actual expert and expertise so that we can help you build your business in a successful way. Let me take a little step back and let's be clear who this session is for and who it is not for. This session is really for the operators who are managing retail inventory risks. For founders of who owns inventory, for CEOs who are responsible for margins and cash. If you're a head merchandiser or a private label leader, this inventory and planning executive, this session is for you. This is for brands from between 1 million to 10 million range, where the growth is real and the complexity is rising. But the decision is still close enough to leadership that structural changes can be possible. This is not for pre-revenue brands. This is not for drop shipping models. And this is not for the businesses without owning inventory exposure. And this is not for the teams looking for forecast shortcuts. This is a session for the leaders who understand that profit durability requires structural discipline. For those who are new to Path to Profit series, I'm losing my words today. My name is Evgenia Alexandrovna Yushkova, or simply Yay, and I'm a fashion business and retail consultant. And my team and I specialize in designing operating systems that produces durable margins inside retail and direct-to-consumer businesses across merchandising, private label, sourcing, supply chain, and financial plannings. We do not fix symptoms. We redesign and the economical structure of the business so profitability holds under pressure. And the open to buy, where it's done correctly, it's one of the most powerful structural tools available in the retail leadership. This is why we're partnering with the Smart Retail guys to be able to bring the service to our clients as well. And today we also have an incredible guest speaker. I'm super excited. Uh, I would like to introduce you to Dan Joblins. And Dan brings deep expertise in merchandising, financial planning systems, and retail analytics. He has worked extensively translating planning logic into operational systems that teams are actually execute inside their real organizations. He's been worked with hundreds of retail stores at this point, helping them to get on the right path. So we're super excited to have him on our call. Dan, do you want to say a couple more words to to everyone who is listening in and
Sure.
tuning in?
Well, thank you for having me on this. It's an honor to be here. I've been a fan of you for a while, and you guys do amazing sessions like these, and what I like about them most is that they really do give people actionable things that they can do. For me, I've worked in retail since I'm 17 years old, so it's been 5 very exciting years. That's my
Love
joke.
it.
Anyway,
I love
anyway,
it.
so like you said, we've worked with hundreds of retailers in 18 countries today, and I, I've worked on the floor. I've been a buyer for many years. I actually installed point of sale systems into retail stores. What I discovered though was that open to buy planning and merchandise planning is how retailers actually make money, right? And we have some examples of that we can show. So manicuring and curating that inventory assortment is everything, right? It's the most important job you have because as a retailer, you spend more money on inventory than anything, more than people, more than rent, more than utilities, more than technology. And so manicuring and curating that is everything. So I'm excited to contribute to this and to follow your lead on all this, Yay, and make sure that we tell people the best things they can do, that whether it's be this or any economy, how they can make sure their stores are successful.
100%, 100%. And thank you for joining our call today. And we're really excited to partner with you as well. Just to kind
Absolutely.
of start off, I just want to remind everyone we are broadcasting this live across multiple platforms. So if you're watching us live, welcome and thank you for spending this hour with us. If you are watching this as a replay later on, feel free to please add comments so that, and if you have any questions, we do respond to all of them. We love to hear your ideas and feedback, as well as please, if you are watching in live and you'd like us to address some of your questions while we're on the call, feel free to put it in the comments. We are seeing them, so we'll try to address as many as we can as we go. But before you really build an open to buy model, you must really ask a foundational questions first. Do we even have the prerequisites in place in order for us to build a open to buy in the efficient way? Because really open to buy is not a magic fix, as you can imagine, and it amplifies the structure and it doesn't really create that structure. So you need to have that structure first. And so then what does the retailer need to have in place before they even consider building open buy to buy model?
Having come from the point of sale world, a lot of people get warned if they don't have a good department class, subclass structure, or category, subcategory structure. A lot of the point of sale companies are a little bit reticent to have you change that because of the impact on the database and history and stuff like that. That said, your department class structure or your category, subcategory, or whatever, however your point of sale operates, right, is really the tool of the buyer, not the tool of the website or the tool of the customer, right? So you have to create a department class structure that relates to how you go to the marketplace, right? So that you have that as a tool when you're getting ready to use your open to buy and actually come up with budgets for your buyers to go to trade shows or go see vendors and buy stuff, that they actually have the categories properly set up. If you're not sure about that, that's a place where Yay and I can help you to figure out what that should look like. But you want to make sure that it exactly aligns with how you think of the merchandise from a buying perspective. Okay. After that, we can finesse a lot of other things in terms of seasonality and stuff like that. But that is the absolute foundation that everything else has to sit on, and make sure we know what that looks like. I'd say that's the
Absolutely.
most critical piece.
Absolutely. And it really also, and to add to this, again, I think at the bare minimum, also we need to think about the clean on order visibility to ensure that we
Yes.
are able to capture. And if you are running a store on a Shopify, especially, be able to figure out how do we able to actually, and you don't have ERP systems, for example, how do we able to see, and you can actually see the clean on order visibility and be able to integrate that into your Shopify backend.
Well, and
Reliable
it's
Go ahead.
It's interesting you mentioned that now, only because Shopify just announced, right, that Stocky, which was the main place that people were entering purchase orders, is being retired, right? And they're trying to migrate everybody to like a more internal view of the of how you do purchase orders, but they haven't yet told us everything about how we're going to do that. So, you know, we're every day going, what about now? Do you know now? Anyway, we're
So
doing
we're in
that
that
every day. But
transitional time. So if you still don't have not used that plugin, you know, maybe wait for another week or so until we learn what is the new exciting way that Shopify came out
yeah,
for us to be
and
able to do this.
And we're sure going to talk about that a lot, so watch for that on social media and stuff like that. Even Shopify themselves doesn't know yet. But I'm a
Absolutely.
huge fan of entering purchase orders, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Not only for the open to buy, but also if you've got a purchase order in the system, receiving the goods when they arrive at the store happens that much faster, right? And because of that, you know, I'm always a big fan, and yeah, and I'm sure you'll agree with me on this. The sooner I get those goods on the floor, the better, right?
Of
I don't want
course.
them sitting in the back room for a while. So if a purchase order has been entered in advance, that stuff can get in there. And also, if a purchase order is in advance, that means as the owner of the store, you don't have to physically be there. You can have other people receive against the PO, tag it, get it on the floor, and get the selling going. So,
Absolutely. And would you say the next thing would be, I think, reliable inventory reporting to ensure that you
yeah.
have not only inventory that's you're capturing on Shopify backend as an example that you are already available, but also having an ability to see the visibility of what's coming and what's on order.
And you can't, by the way, really properly project your cash flow if you haven't entered purchase orders because you don't know. You don't know when the goods are going to land, and you don't know what's going to happen as a result. You know, so proper cash flow planning includes really having a good understanding of when that stuff happens. So,
Agree 100%. And another one I want to mention that, you know, in addition to the category ownerships and really defined decision rights, we also need to think about the sales plan. You know, even if it's
mhm.
just directional, we got to understand what your sales plan is that you're trying to hit so that the open to buy can go and work backwards to ensure that you give makes the recommendations of what you need to buy at what point in order to hit your sales goals.
Which also means if you don't have your POs in, we can't modify. You know, let's just say we had a sales plan, and let's pretend it was $30,000 for the season in a particular category, and you bought 70,000. Okay. That means we got to do something to modify that sales plan because the goods are going to be there, right? Or conversely, if we planned you for 30,000 and you bought five, we have to either buy more of that or change our product mix based on what you did buy, right? So all of that ties back to purchase order management.
100%. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And now that we all kind of defined the structure, assuming that you guys already have it, and if you don't, again, we are here to help. Please do feel free to reach out. We can help you to set up the right structure so that you are on the right path. But let's really set the operating definition for today. You know, what is really open to buy? And because open to buy is often confused, but we want to say it's not a budget because that's often what I hear. Well, yeah, I have an open to buy. It's part of my budget. And like, it is not a budget. And
It's not a
open to
budget.
buy is really the controlled permission to commit inventory dollars based on what you need to achieve in sales, margins, and inventory productivity. It's your forward-looking inventory control system. And if it's done correctly, it really helps to create guardrails, not only for your own self, if you're a solo owner and a buyer, but also for your team, if you're running a team and have a team of buyers. And we can do it based by category or product class to really help to show the guardrails so that they can work within. So it's really not, I mean, Dan, it's now because you constantly see this as well. You probably hear this all the time. Well, yeah, we use it as a budget, or we do this, or we do that. And in reality of the things, it's really not what a lot of people think what it is.
You know, I think if when the tool is properly utilized, it's actually the best way to take the temperature of a business and see what's happening in it, right? So, as an example, I mean, budgets are great, but also, you know, I find a lot of times when people budget, like, where do they get their budget from? Well, their CPA told them last year you did $1.2 million. This year, I think you should do $1.4 million, just because I said so. You know, but that's not necessarily the way it should work, right? It should be a live, interactive, breathing part of what the business is. And if you go back to the history of open to buy, not that anyone besides me would ever do that, but if you actually were to go back and look at the history of open to buy, okay, it started in the department stores in the 1970s because buyers were buying stuff and the financial people were like, okay, it's great that you bought all this. When does it turn into money? Right? And so part of the open to buy really at its heart is a cash flow plan as well, right? And
Absolutely.
that's a big piece of this. So
Absolutely.
um,
And also I want to mention, when we are actually layering in the gross margin return on inventory, it is really the profitability filter layered on top of that system, right? And so one of the things that that really doesn't answer is how much gross margin am I earning for every dollar invested in this inventory? And when we
right,
combine open to buy with GM ROI, we stop really buying for revenue and we start buying for profitability. Would you say that that would be an accurate statement?
without question. And we have some examples that we'll show in a little bit here, but it's not just about top line revenue. It's also about how well did we sell through it? How much of our planned margin did we actually get? Right? GMROI, for those of you that are not really fluent in it, is probably one of the most important stats there is in retail because it's a measure of your profitability divided by your inventory investment, right? So it's the best place for you to see whether the things are working or not working well, right? And so it's not just about here's the amount of money I have to spend. It's also here's the amount of markdowns I am budgeting, and this is where I expect the inventory to end at the end of the season so that we've cashed out and have money ready for next season.
Absolutely, absolutely. And before we start really building it and kind of talking more about all the steps that are going into open to buy, I want to really anchor one of the main principles, that your open to buy is the only as good as the discipline around it. The spreadsheets is an easy part, is to create it. But the hard part is really to decide, what will help you to save and what you actually need to do when the bad inventory positions, right? In by buying more of them and avoiding buying more of the bad inventory, because it helps you to kind of define exactly where your focus needs to be and where your primary profitability are. So having those
Uh-oh, we lost Yay. um, all right, well, I'm just going to jump in with a little bit more. Oh, Yay, you still there?
Yes, yes, I'm here. I don't know what happened. That was strange.
That was a terrifying moment for all of us. We lost you there. I didn't know
No,
what
no,
happened there.
I don't know what that. I don't know. That was really, really bizarre. I've never had this before happen,
Okay,
but it is what it is. We move on. So I just really want
okay.
to make sure that we can, that you can hold that line, right? And your open to buy becomes profit lever, not just an administrative tool. And that's a really important mental shift that often we have to work through with a lot of our clients. Is that it's just not once and done. It's something that you do come back weekly, bi-weekly to look at, and of course you are reforecast up monthly basis.
When we prepare an open to buy, first off, for most point of sale systems that we connected to, it updates every single day. Okay. So it does update and it's a living, breathing, and where are we trending and that sort of thing, right? And we reforecast every single month. So it's not just a one and done in terms of forecasting. As we see things trending, we change the open to buy to match that trend so we maximize our sell through, right?
Hmm. Interesting. And absolutely. And that's what I think becomes a really great living tool for anybody who is in the retail space that are trying to kind of get a grasp on it as they are in the season or as they are progressing throughout the year. Absolutely. Let's take a little bit of a pause here, and I'd love to kind of talk through about what really requires, right, to go into open to buy and what we need to consider. First, we really need to structure, as a number one, is a discipline and structure. At the minimum, your open to buy model needs time, hierarchy, sales plan, inventory, and flow. Time can really be monthly for strategic purposes and but weekly for operational purposes. So that is why we often say that it's important to go back to your open to buy while we are reforecasting it and reporting it back to you on a monthly basis, but you should be going back to it on a weekly basis, if not on a daily basis, as Dan mentioned right now. And most teams, we recommend like monthly buckets with a weekly check-ins, right? Because you can really have a financial visibility for the month, but the agility of the weekly actions is critical so that you don't wait till the end of the month or end of the quarter to make your adjustments. You can make adjustments as you are placing your reorders, as you are potentially reaching out and sampling new product in or bringing in new product for your next delivery. I mean, this, especially now in an environment where we often buy so close to the delivery, and chase immediates, this is an important piece, I think, to have. Dan, do you have a little more to add on to this?
Yeah, here's the thing. Part of the reason to look at it on a weekly basis is we establish a sales plan and an inventory plan, and we want to see how that's trending, right? I have
Mm-hmm.
discovered sometimes that, like, okay, well, we're not hitting our sales plan. Well, why aren't we hitting our sales plan? Okay, well, the order didn't arrive. Well, are we chasing the vendor? Are we making sure we're getting the goods in there? Or, yeah, the goods arrived, but they're still sitting in the warehouse someplace. They didn't get actually moved to the stores. Okay, well, that's part of a problem. And especially when we're talking about fashion, the clock is ticking hardcore, right? So we got to make sure we're getting that in there. So we're going to start to see some things and gain some insights. On the other side of it, it could be like, oh my God, we're crushing the sales plan. What's going on? Well, it's a sweater year, right? And so people are buying sweaters like crazy. Do I have that backed up? Do I see some trending already in all of that, right? All of that is stuff that you can see better in an open to buy plan than anywhere else, okay? Because you can actually see how that stretches across the entire plan for an entire season, and point of sale systems just don't offer that. So your ability to manage and not only think tactically, but think strategically, where are we going, is part of why that's so critical.
100%. And I also want to add here that if your team buys by category and sometimes by subcategory, then build it at the category and subcategory level. But if you buy in by kind of department only, if you're more a bigger type of a retailer, then maybe you start there. The most
Yeah,
common failure that we see, right, is to building open to buy too high level. Then the people have no idea what to do with it, or in how to output, what to do with that output. Or the second most common failure is they build it too low and it becomes really unmanageable and it really dies out. So the sweet spot is always says at the decision level is where you want to
right.
build it.
That's why that department class structure is so critical in terms of creating that, right? You've got to make sure that it's at a level that you are making decisions. So, like, the great examples of that, something like, let's just take women's bottoms as an example. So if you're dumping denim together with casual pants, together with dress pants, or with skirts and shorts and skirts, you're not going to see the finesse points in there. And it could be that casual pants are killing it and denim is taking a back seat right now, okay? Or the reverse, but you won't know until you actually dig into that and see what that looks like. So if it's too high level, it becomes, oh, I'm not getting anything out of it. If it's too low level, it's too painful to go into it and actually manage with it, right? So part of what we are constantly doing is finessing that for you so that we actually get to a point where you have an actionable group of statistics that you can do something with.
Absolutely. No, I love this. And this is really, I think, really critical to understand so that you could be able to be successful with the open to buy tool that we are suggesting. But let's talk a little bit about open to buy calculations. And then I think I'd love to really for you to walk us through this. I mean, because you live and breathe this every single day. But
Sure.
really, what is the open to buy calculations when we look at between the planned receipts equals to plan ending, right, of the inventory ending, where we then subtract beginning of inventory plus the on order inventory, and then we add the
Right.
plan of sales. So tell us a little
Right.
bit more about this.
So basically, it's funny because I think of this equation the exact opposite, like that, the mirror image of this, but it's still correct, right? Which is that even if I start all the way to the right, so we actually are coming up with a sales plan. What do we believe we can sell? How do we what do we think we can do, and how much full price loan can we do and get some great penetration on that, right? We've got to see what our current inventory is and what the on order is. And the one thing I would say is a little bit of a finesse point in that part that's in brackets that we have to look at also, right? Is that when I look at that beginning inventory, I also have to consider the viability of that inventory, right? One of the things that what we measure very carefully on in our open to buy planning is how fresh those goods are, right? I'm a big fan of this saying because I made it up myself. But here's what the saying is, right? Which is that if your customer comes in this month and sees what they saw last month, they're not coming next month, right? And part of what a good open to buy plan does is constantly push you to bring fresh inventory every single month, right? So that we are going to, it is the beginning inventory plus the on order minus the planned ending inventory, which is what the receipts are. But we also have to qualify what that beginning inventory looks like, right? And make sure that's okay. But the idea about the planned ending inventory is something that most buyers miss, right? They go to shows and they go, oh, I could sell that. Oh, I could sell that. Oh, I could sell that. It's not only what you can sell, but it's also where do you want to end the season, right? So planning the ending inventory is something most buyers miss. And if they miss that by a lot, they're going to end up with either not enough inventory and miss sales and send customers other places, or they're going to have too much inventory, end up having to go on sale and teach their customers, wait, because we're going to go on sale and you don't have to buy it and send the stuff at full price. So that planned ending inventory number is also a super important number.
Absolutely. And I'm going to add to this, now, of course, as my wheels are turning from the supply chain end of it, is to really thinking about, can you partner up with brands that allow you to do a quick chases? Can you be, or that potentially have things in stock that you could be able to chase with as you are, in the mid of that delivery, right? Or you're
Yeah,
starting to see that you're running too low. Because a lot of times
I,
when
I
we see, go ahead.
I think it depends on the retailer. Some of them can chase and some of them can't, right? And there are certain, even within a category, like let's just take casual footwear as an example, okay? There are certain vendors that do not let you chase. You have to commit way up front. There's no get out of jail free card. There's no, that kind of thing. I say uh, almost every sector of retail has a vendor that's like the mafia. This is what you have to
Yes.
buy, right? Um, and so you don't get to chase those guys, right? But the ones that you can chase, you have to look at that and you have to preserve some of your open to buy for that. So if you get $10,000 in a category of open to buy in a particular month, you might say, I'm going to hold back 10% or 15% for fill-ins and to chase orders. Denim is a really good situation like that, right? We need money, we need time and money for fill-ins, right? I sell through my 27s, I got to get those back in again, right? So I got to hold some of that budget back for that, right? And I think it's another topic, but I just want to plant the seed for it. Another thing I think it's important that we can also help with is a good vendor scorecard. You have to
Yes.
measure, did the vendor, how did we do with that vendor? Every vendor likes to say we're your partners, okay? But sometimes you have to go, hey, partner, here's what happened last season. What do we do about that, and how do we avoid that next season, right?
No, 100%. And we talk about this all the time. Vendor scorecards are the must. And whether you do them first off the system and later on in the system, it's really helps you to define that partnership and define the relationship with treating those vendors not just as a supplier, but as an actual partner. And which you hold them accountable. You see where they start to slip, where they start there to underperform, or potentially where the other brands are overperforming them and in which category, so that you can have that dialogue with your
Yeah,
vendors and be able to build strong partnerships. Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up.
we also have scenarios. I'll just say this very quickly because we have a lot to cover. But we also have scenarios where we look at a vendor scorecard and we go, we underbought this category from you. And I mean, we sold every piece we had, we sold it all at full price. Maybe we missed some opportunities there. So the vendor scorecard is not just a place to beat up on the vendor and say, we didn't get this, we didn't get that, that kind of thing. It's
Right.
also a place to seek out opportunities where we can do something better and get some better selling out of those guys, right? And sometimes you find the vendor is great in this category, not as good in that category, and you have to shift your open to buy dollars within that vendor to where their strengths are.
No,
Right. So
100%. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And then where do you see most commonly to see where this formula fail in the real implementation when we're talking about with the open to buy?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Where do we see most commonly where the formula fails, right? When we are into actual real implementation of open to buy.
I'd say when there's real outliers, when there are category killers, suddenly we see this a lot in casual footwear. By the way, it's another place where it happens, where something like a hey dude pops up, right? And it's like off the charts. Everybody has to have them, blah blah blah, that kind of thing. And so suddenly, your structured and well thought out open to buy has to almost go out the window, right?
Yeah.
Um, uh, um, as opposed to a category where things are sort of standard, that kind of thing, right? Where it's the same kind of thing on a regular basis. I'd say the calculation goes off there, or the calculation goes off if there isn't an integration between the open to buy and what the buyer is thinking. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
For example, we might come up with a sales plan or an inventory plan for dresses, let's say. Okay. But then buyers go to the shows and they go, you know what? It's going to be a dress year. Everybody's showing dresses. It's going to be an exciting dress year. We have to rethink our open to buy now because that's what we see in the marketplace. And if we don't actually take time to rethink the open to buy, go, you know what? I've just been to 3 trade shows. Everybody's talking about dresses. I want to do less related separates. I want to do more dresses. Okay. Your open to buy plan should then be modified to do that, right? So that you actually, so that your plan aligns with your vision and you can make sure that your vision is right. Okay. It also should give you the ability to look and see, was my vision right? And if not, pivot and fail fast. I hate that term, by the way, fail fast, because fail is the first word and it's not my interest, right? But what it does mean is like you've got to be able to pivot quickly, right? Okay, we thought it was going to be a great dress year. We landed a bunch of dresses, then our customer went, yeah, no, not for me. Thanks anyway, right? I got to move quickly. I can't just let that linger. I got to figure that out,
Makes total
right?
sense.
So the open to buy needs to move with you, right? So the calculation works to the degree that also humans are monitoring the calculation and properly adjusting for when the market changes with us, or when consumer tastes or buyer or vendor plans change with the market. It's an
One,
important piece.
I couldn't disagree with you more. And we have one question that just came in. Dan, this is actually one for you. What about your mark on for the commodities at 2.2 markup for basics and 2.5 for fashion markdowns products? What build you sorry, you build your markup up front for your GM or ROI or not?
Correct. You have to build, well, what you have to plan is both your initial markup and your maintain markup, right? It's a fantasy to think that you're not going to take markdowns. Okay. So I'd like to tell you that there's a perfect buyer out there that will tell you exactly what to buy. Doesn't happen that way. And let me just say this right now: AI isn't going to tell you that either. Okay. Well, I
I
think
love
now
that
we
that you
think,
got it right there. Yes.
I think people think AI is going to cure everything that's ever been wrong ever in the history of mankind. It's not. It's a great tool and it has some great uses, but it's not the be all end all. And it's a tool, but you know what? This is an emotional business, right? When people buy stuff, especially when we're talking about fashion, we're talking about things, yay, that you and I love, right? I had someone say to me, well, the economy is bad and people don't need what I have. It's like, you know what? Unless we're going to go into the toilet paper and toothpaste business, nobody needs this stuff, but they buy it because they're emotionally tied to it. And so we've got to be able to match that emotion and make sure we're tracking with them in every step of the way.
At
So
100%. At 100%. And one of the things also I wanted to say that, when the breakdown happens, outside of the math potentially breakdown, or it's really about a lot of times of the input of discipline, right? If you are not disciplined to put your on order as on orders and or they putting them inaccurately, or you have timing mismatch as an example, or unrecorded commitments. Without that data, your open to buy becomes really an illusion. And that really
yeah,
echoes to what Dan just mentioned. The discipline of making sure that everything is recorded and trackable is critical in order for this to work and be successful.
exactly. Exactly. You have to, if looking at this slide right here, right? Um, uh, if we're going to break up our buys that way, and we agree that's the sort of the methodology or the policy by which we're going to operate, then we have to make sure that all our priority buys are in and our risk buys are in, right? And we have to be able to look at the risk buys. There's nothing worse than suddenly there's a surprise snowstorm of merchandise that arrives that we didn't think was going to happen, and now we're going to have to figure out how we're going to deal with all that because we just didn't know, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm gonna take one more question because it just came in and I think it really echoes to what we're just trying to explain is what if my sales plan is wrong?
Well, first off, why is it wrong, right? You can diagnose anything if you understand the cause.
Agree.
So,
Agree.
is my sales plan wrong because I was too aggressive? Is it wrong because my you know I've this is something more in the surf and skate world, but I'll tell you a thing that happens, right? So those guys get very, very, very brand loyal, right? So buyer lands some stuff in a brand that the guys on the floor think is not cool, and they literally like almost boycott it. Don't buy that. You know what I meis your sales plan wrong, because there could be a lot of reasons, right? It could be, the quality wasn't what I thought it was going to be. We've had it where sizing is wrong, right? Where um, a large is actually a medium and people are busting out of it, that kind of thing. Is it that the colors, the colors didn't match well? I think one of the things you got to look for is what's getting left in the dressing room, right? If it's getting left in the dressing room, that means that people looked at it, but it didn't work for some reason, right? And I think the sooner you attack that and figure that out, the sooner you can talk to the vendor about it and get that situation fixed. Okay. Or it just could be we're wrong, right? And if we're wrong, then what is right and what do we do to make that right?
And to echo that, this is exactly what we often tell to our clients. The point is not the perfection. The point is having a mechanism that forces weekly corrections based on the real performance instead of gut feeling. And the bottle is
Right.
really your correction system. And this is why where Dan and I are continuously repeating that this is not once and done deal. You're constantly going back and making continuous improvements as you're learning. And of course, the more you
Right.
do this, then closer your sales project plans and projections will become as you are getting into this discipline. Absolutely.
Well, you know what? There's no such thing as a perfect buyer. So you know what? You're gonna look at stuff. You're gonna think that's the cutest thing ever, and then you're gonna get on the floor, and the customer's like, "Yeah, not so much." If that happens, we got to figure that out and get on to the next thing. You
Exactly,
know.
exactly.
So
And one of the things I really also want to say that, that the basis of the open to buy engine and what really they are thinking how if that connects to ROI. But it's really not about just again looking at the numbers and what to buy and where it is, but we're looking at what actually drives profitability. And this is why the GMROI really is important because it helps us to understand how much returning that inventory, right? And how much of that inventory actually brings return on the investment that we're doing. Here's
right.
the one of the things that we are often talk about and us often ask, one of the first questions when we work with our clients is how much gross margin dollars, are you earning for every dollar in inventory you are carrying? You'll be surprised how many often we answers we get, well, I'm not sure. And that is where the problem begins, right? It is a profitability and cash efficiency ratio, not just necessarily of saying, hey, here is what we want to buy, or not to buy, but thinking about what to buy, what drives the most profitability and what we can turn. When
I
gross
have a
margin are, go ahead then.
I have a client, and what they do every month is they do the, I hate to put it this way, but the warehouse walk of shame, and
Wow.
they make the buyer walk the warehouse so they can physically see what's sitting there, right?
I love it.
So it isn't just like a big number on a piece of paper. It's oh my God, look at all the racks and bins that have this stuff in there. I got to do something about this, right? So
Absolutely.
I'm a big fan of that.
Because if your inventory really is not turning, right? If your GM or ROI is not strong, what it really means that you're tying up the cash for the efficiency return,
Correct.
right? Which is
Right.
usually shows up later as markdowns, discounting, and margin leaks. And as we've mentioned before, this is a slow erosion. This is not something that you're going to see overnight. But if you're not keeping your fingers on that pulse, you're going to be very surprised towards the end of the season or even maybe towards the end of the year that you've done all those sales, but your profitability actually tanked. And that's
Here's a
critical.
here's another saying of mine, which is that inventory is neither wine nor cheese and doesn't get better with age. So if you've landed something and it's not working, okay, that's why you have to react quickly. And we want to get our dollars out of the things that aren't selling and into things that are selling, right? So you're not going to see that unless you're looking at your open to buys and you're looking at your trending and you're going, yeah, okay, this was my plan. This is what I bought. This is what actually landed. What's working, what's not working, and how do I pivot and adjust to make that happen? And that's what makes the open to buy a living, breathing, and working tool. It's not just, okay, I set the budget once in January of the year, and that's the end of it. You have to look at it, week in and week out to make sure that you're actually achieving what those budgets are, so that you don't find yourself going, oh my God, what happened to all my cash?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then when you guys, when organizations attempt to embed GM ROI, threshold inside their systems, where does the internal resistance usually surface among your clients?
I think it's just because some people think it's a very complicated bit of math, and so it's hard for them to do. But if you think about GMROI, right? If you think about what that really means, it is your profit divided by your average inventory at cost. Okay, that's how it's calculated. So if I want to, and you can think of GMROI this way. I learned this from a mentor of mine many years ago, right? It basically means for every dollar you invested, how many dollars did you get out of it? Right? And you could think of GMROI if you're a fashion business, mostly like this. The first dollar goes to operations, people, utilities, rent, that kind of thing. The second dollar goes to the merchandise, okay? And everything above that is profit. So if I want more profit, right? Well, either I'm going to improve my margin or I'm going to reduce my inventory investment. And once you understand that about the GMROI, utilizing it to go, okay, my GMROI is a 2.2. I want to get to a 3. How am I going to get there? Well, either I got to find ways to create more profit, which means buying it smarter, taking less markdowns, or I have to basically look at how can I turn faster so that I get more profit out of it, right? So I think understanding the math a little bit and understanding that it's not very complicated math. It sounds like it's complicated math, but it really isn't. And once you understand where the math comes from, you can then utilize it as a tool to drive more profitability and better turn and better cash flow.
Exactly. And one of the questions, Mary, thank you for asking, what is the standard inventory turn for clothing versus accessories?
We like clothing to turn at least 3 times, but there are certain categories such as like T-shirts where you can turn those much, much faster.
Right. Depends.
Footwear turn.
That's why I always say depends on your supply chain, right? Depends on how quickly your vendors can be able to deliver and how much you can chase.
Yeah, yeah. I think honestly, when we start looking at people's open to buys, it's less about the industry standard. I mean, we do certainly look at that, but it's more about where are you today, and if I can get you to be a half turn faster, right? That's all we're going to march you up in terms of turn, okay?
Yeah.
And it is, of course, possible to turn too fast, and you're out of the goods before everybody got a chance to buy them and see them, right?
100%.
So
100%. Those are great questions. Thank you, Mary, for asking it. Well, let's talk really about also priority buys versus risk buys, because this is where your team either behaves like an operator or behaves like a gambler. And we see this all the time. A priority buy is a buy when you can defend with the evidence that it is going to turn, that it is working, you have the demand. It has one or more of these characteristics, right? It is replenishable against proven demand. It is a strong sell-through performer. It is a margin accelerator, or it also supports a strategic traffic driver without damaging the profitability. Or its inventory coverage, you must have to protect your sales plan with low risk. Priority buys are the purchases that keep the business stable and profitable. While a risk buy is a buy where it's really speculative. And it might be a new silhouette or a new trend or a new vendor or a new color or a new category that you're trying on. And risk buys are necessary because you need to fire those bullets in order to find where your actual new nuggets are that you could potentially grow. But risk buys can be also be smart, right? And you got to be thinking about in a smart way about it. And what they must be really controlled. And that's really important, especially for smaller brands and retail brands. What we often see, they think that they need to change their floor constantly. And that means they literally need to, sell through everything they have and then have completely new assortment altogether. Well, we always say that it's a balance, right? So you hear me talk a lot about the 60/40 or 70/30 rule of 60% should be carryover, 40% reserved for the new, but even that breaks down into safe newness, where it's what we know it's working with upscale, and then what's really new is only becomes 10 to 15%. So thinking about in the same format about your priority buys versus your risk buys and splitting them in like 70/30 sweet spot is probably going to be an optimal thing to think about. And that's what the open to buy should reveal us to be able to help us see this. A clean starting point for many of these businesses, like I've mentioned, it would be really good to start thinking about the 70/30 rule. And 70% of open to buy is being reserved for your priority buys, while the 30% are flexible for the risks and chases. But this ratio is not a universal ratio either. Each brand is different, each demand is different, each needs are different. And if you are highly like seasonal fashion business with a big trend volatility, then your risk bucket might be larger. But if you control, but you still have to be controlling and controlling it strong. And if you are more on a replenishment heavy and basic driven business, then your risk buys should be even smaller than 30%. Dan, would you, when you guys work with your clients, how do you kind of help to bridge that gap between the priority buys versus the risk buys and define what that sweet spot is?
Well, the risk buys also are a place for the buyer to have a little fun, right? I mean, the priority buys often are just sort of like, well, okay, here's what I know I'm supposed to buy. This is the stuff that we know sells all the time, blah blah blah, that kind of thing, right? Whereas the risk buys are more like, you know what, here's a place for you to like maybe test out your instincts, see what you think about that, see what you think you want to do with that, etc. Right? So that's where some of the fun comes into this, right? Is also to be able to stretch out a little bit and try some new things. Here's the other thing about it, right? The key to a lot of this, right, is also finding some new fun things that are going to excite and interest your customer, right? To surprise them with something new that they didn't think was going to be there. And I think that's an important, that's a super important thing, because that's how you keep them coming back, right? To be surprised by something new that they didn't know was going to be there before, and it's there now. And look at this fun thing, right? And yeah, you're going to make some mistakes there, and you're going to have to get out of some of those goods. That's part of it, but that's how you also find places that the business might grow that wasn't going to grow before. I had one customer that did a very small dress business, and I said, "Why do you do so little in dresses?" She said, "Well, my salespeople say we can't sell it." And I go, maybe they're wrong about that. So maybe we need to actually land a little bit more and see what's cooking there, right? So we did, and it became the second best class in our store.
Interesting.
So
Really
you're
interesting.
not going to know about opportunities in your business unless you actually take your buy and split it that way. But you also need to make sure you've controlled that, so you don't just go off on some wild. Listen, I have seen the vision, and it's cardigan sweaters. It's like, maybe it is. Like, we need to find out. Okay, let's find a way to mitigate that risk, but take that risk so that we actually see if it is that, and if it is, then we can pour some coals on that and really get it going. Right?
Exactly. And really just thinking about leaving with this conversation is that risk buys do not just get budget, right? They get rules. And then those rules are what critical to really understand. And when what goes into this open to buy seasonality rules that we really need to consider, right? One of the rules would be to reserve your chase to budget, but chase budget is definitely going to be important. That's what we just talked about. Tie risk buys to measurable thresholds is really important.
Yeah.
GMROI gating to understand where that threshold is and where you can stop or where you need to increase and what you need to actually do in order for that to keep growing. Freeze new buys above exposure threshold. That's also going to be critically important. Adjust a posture by season phases, right? So where that is going to seasonality will also impact your category buys. Your outerwear would be definitely much more heavier in the fall buys, where it would be your t-shirts potentially be more heavier in a spring buys. I mean, those are really important to understand the seasonality and the phases and what you need to focus on and in which categories. Aligning
Really, I'm just
receipts
gonna
with,
let me
go
just give
ahead.
you a quick
Yes,
example
please.
that really fast on the season one, because it's one that pops up all the time. The first thing department stores mark down, the first thing they mark down is outerwear. They use it as a loss leader to get people in the door. So if you're buying into outerwear, as an example, you got to buy it lean. You got to be out of it before the department stores go on sale, so that you're not stuck with a whole bunch of outerwear that you can't move because they took major brands and did major discounts purely to get people to walk in that door. So I just
Correct.
had to jump in with
Correct.
that one. So there you go.
No, no,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Dave.
you're absolutely right. And we have to make sure that we also align receipts with the lead time reality, because that's also, and so understanding your exact lead times by vendors also, and by category or by product, is super critical to ensure that it's calculated into your open to buy how long it's going to take. Because each category or each vendor will have different lead times, and that needs to be taken into account. And then taper
Absolutely.
receipts when the markdown risks rises. So this is why, again, keeping that finger on the pulse at all time, where you can see that, something that you brought in potentially didn't work as well as you were thinking. So now your markdowns are starting to rise. And thinking about, when you position your risk buys, also thinking about the markup, right? So usually on the risk buys, we might need to anticipate that a lot of that will go on a markdown. So what markup do you really bring it in order for you to be able to still be profitable at the bottom line?
Here's the
Um,
truth of it.
yeah.
If we each if Ye and I each owned a store and I end my season with $50,000 of inventory and she ends it with $30,000 of inventory, she wins, right? I'm gonna have to take big markdowns to get out of that. I don't have the cash out yet to buy next season's goods. I'm gonna find myself in trouble, right? So that's the thing of it. The counterbalance to it, right, is also if you've made a bad buy and your markdowns are rising, right? Open to buy is not like, well, you don't get dessert because you didn't eat your vegetables, right? If you've identified something that's bad, you've got to take that markdown to get out of the bad goods, and you got to start to float in some stuff that is good, or else you kill the category and no one's going to buy it from you ever.
Exactly, exactly. And as well as to keep in mind that it's all about discipline, right? So if your sales are going down and your inventory is going up as you are already in mid-season, what do we need to do? We need to make sure that we cut, right? We stop buying. We start figuring out how we can move this product. Where if your sales are going up, right, and then your inventory is going down, now you have an opportunities where you need to chase your winners because you have opportunities to increase your returns, right? To be able to sell more of it. But if your GM ROI deteriorates, then that's where we're thinking about the reassess your mix, right? Not necessarily the volume of how much you're buying, but what you're actually buying, or how many SKUs do you have too many end choices versus or choices in your
Right.
assortment? This is where we start to really understand and figure out that discipline, in order for you to be able to make adjustments quickly and hopefully end the season and the year in the right category. And that's why it's important to redo it on a monthly basis. Would you
Right.
agree?
I would agree. I would say, sometimes people worry about planning based on GMROI, but you know what? If you've planned your sales properly and you've planned your markdowns properly and you've planned your turn properly, it's going to magically result in a good GMROI, right? So you got to think about the components of that to get to where you need to be.
Absolutely. And now that we're coming to the top of our hour, I just want to bring everything together, right? Of what really goes into the open to buy and how we do this. You want to start with one level of hierarchy that your team can manage. Do not overbuild. Build 12 monthly columns, and then optionally add weekly views under each month if needed. You want to input your sales plan by month. You set up your end inventory targets by month based on the weeks of supply and strategic coverage needs. You want to input your beginning inventory and on order commitment. You want to calculate your planned receipts and open to buy. Then you want to split open to buy into priority and risk buckets. You want to add your GM ROI target column and a current matrix column to track it. And then you want to add a simple gate line that says, if the GMROI is below target, risk bucket spending is restricted, right? And if the priority buys must be replenishment only, or really on the margin, margin accuracy, right? So the making sure that you are setting those rules and gateways, I call it control measure points, are super critical so that you can see where you are and measure yourself and pivot where you need to based on the rules that you set. And then the
Hmm.
seasonal rules is, as written, I call it as a buying policy. Notes directly into the sheets where the teams cannot claim that they did not know. So that's the other thing is we often say, okay, well, the rules live in one file, the open to buy lives in another file, and then we wonder why our buying teams are not following the rules that we create. So thinking about how to put it all into one document, whether it's in different tabs, so that they are looking and have reference points, so they don't have a reason to say that they've never got it or they never knew the rules in the first place. So those are
Yeah.
the critical things to think about, what needs to go into as you are building your open to buy model. And
It is
helping, go ahead then.
it is a discipline like anything else, right? It's a discipline no different than going to the gym. It's a discipline no different than, if I have a kid and I tell the kid I want you to make your bed every day, if I don't check to see if he's made his bed every single day and he doesn't make it, nothing happens. He's not going to make his bed the next day, right? So, I think you have to. There's some disciplines in there, but like anything else, when you set a discipline for something, if you set the discipline and the discipline also moves with you, and the discipline adjusts to what's happening in the marketplace and adjusts for seasonality, you're going to achieve your financial goals purely because you do that, right?
Correct.
I mean, that's the idea. So
That's the
it is a
idea.
discipline, right?
It's all
Now,
about the discipline.
so I got to say this about that, right? Which is, oh, I think I lost Yay, but this, oh, no, there you are. You're in the little corner. Okay. So here's the thing about open to buy, right? First off, we always say that in every retail business, there's the art and the science, right? The art is that's a cute blouse, that's the right color story, it's the right fabric story, etc. The science is here's how much you need to achieve the right cash flow, right? We're the science. Okay, you can look at me and know that fashion is probably, I'm not the most fashionable guy ever, but you can, people dress me for events like this usually, but the idea of it is that, like, the science of it is critical and should inform the art side, right? So if all of this seems complicated or a lot to do or a lot of that kind, open to buy has come a long way. In the beginning, it was a harder thing to do, but it's come a long way. And so there's lots of integrations out there now to almost every point of sale system that there is. So there's no reason for you to have to fight so hard to do this stuff. If this seems complicated and you just want to go and buy pretty things and you want someone else to tell you what that math is, that's what these integrations are there to do for you. Right. So
And
if you're not a numbers person or don't want to be a numbers person, just make sure you partner with a numbers person so that you get the data you need to make sure your store is successful.
And then we can help you to interpret, not only create the reports, but also help you to interpret them and build strategies around that. And that's the benefit
Exactly.
of working with a professional team. Well, I'd love to
Exactly.
conclude us, and thank you, Dan, so much for your time and joining us. I'm super excited about our partnership. We're looking forward to be able to bring this service to our clients as well. So super exciting. I just want to mention and remind everyone, we do host this Path to Profit every third Thursday of the month at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The topics are on our LinkedIn page. You can find us at Yay Designs on LinkedIn or Instagram or YouTube, wherever you are prefer to look. We do also, whatever kind of mentioned, that the next roundtable, which is also hosted on every first Tuesday of the month at 11 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, is going to be on the topic of the hidden margin leaks costing fashion brands millions. So highly recommend for you guys to join that one. And then our next Path to Profit where we look at the margins and where they're slipping, right? And where the profit leaks happen, so that we can help you figure out how to audit it. So, if you like the content that we're providing and value, please, like, share, so that we are able to be able to know that this is valuable and we are providing value to every single person that is listening or following. Please do leave comments as you are watching the replay. We love to hear from you, not only your thoughts, but as well as potentially questions, which we will always address and answer. And also, please do share with people who think that could really bring value, because that is the only way we can touch as many people and bring our community in fashion and retail together to help one another to build a strong business for you, as well as for everyone else around. Thank you, everyone, so much for your time. I look forward to seeing you guys next first Tuesday of the month.